Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to a special edition of the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. Well, who else? I'll tell you, the glorious Thea's joining us again today, and we're going to be diving into the fascinating, sometimes unsettling world of artificial intelligence. From its humble beginnings to the cutting-edge breakthroughs shaping our headlines, AI is transforming how we live, work, and think. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore its history, unpack the latest news, and ask some killer questions that might just keep you up at night. I'm delighted to welcome back Thea. How are you, Thea?
Really good. Life is good. The sun is shining in the UK, so I always feel happy when that's happening. And yeah, life is generally good. I was at an AI Hive event the other day, listening to the amazing Chi Wong talk. Who don't know if you know who Chi Wong is, but he had an LLM called AutoGen, and now he's gone into agentic AI. So he's doing AG2, and there was also another brand there called Apoa. And basically, this is an agentic AI. They're developing an agentic AI. They've just done their second round of funding, and this is one that'll be able to taste and smell. So literally, sommeliers might be out of a job.
Ah, it is glorious, isn't it? Because every single time that we come on, and we do this very regularly, back to the futurist,
Right.
looking at the AI developments, and there's seismic developments across every industry. I want to take us back into history, though, because a lot of people say AI is everything and it's all now. Well, actually, it was a long, long time ago, back in the 50s. And when Alan
Mm,
Turing asked, "Can machines think?" in 1950, did he
yeah.
imagine AI would one day write music or diagnose diseases? Where did it all begin?
Well, I think yeah, you have to kind of look at the history of it. People don't realize that AI has been used in their life for quite some time. Your predictive text on your phone is AI. Your spell check is AI, and that has been transform. So I'm dyslexic, and that's been transformative for me. I used to always get failed. I went to Fettes in Scotland. And I used to have this teacher called Mr. Murray. And he'd been in the military and he'd been at Fettes, the scholarship boy, and it was the best years of his life. And it was the days when Fettes would like pick people out of obscurity and then give them a future. And they'd go off and basically and so he used to fail me for everything because my spelling was so atrocious. And yeah, and then there would always be a hullabaloo that actually I had gotten the concepts and it just I clearly had learning difficulties. But yeah, and so nowadays with things like that, I think it's amazing. But I do think on the other side of things like spell check is that people now can't spell. So even people who aren't dyslexic read like they're dyslexic because they haven't learned
And
to
that's the
spell.
problem, isn't it? I always say if you don't use it, you lose it. And people now, we've got
Mm.
calculators. When I was young, all those years ago, well, not so long
It was
ago
only
actually,
yesterday, Andrew.
we used to have to do mental arithmetic, but now you've got a calculator to do it. We used to have to be able to spell, but now you have spell checkers. And even now we're getting things writing by AI. And I always say what we have to do then is to find
Mm.
new skills like oracy. So getting
Mm.
children to stand up in class, yes, use AI as a co-pilot, but turn around and stand in front of an audience and explain it, because that's the way that you can show you understand.
Oh my God, that gives me an idea. I teach public speaking.
I
And
do.
so, yes, and it is one of these things that I've been looking at. So Google's AI kind of they have a thing now where you can interact with it talking, and you can like it can literally like coach you. Say you're using something like Photoshop, you can pop on, and I've been using Photoshop for 30 years, but for somebody who doesn't have that fluency, they can now pop on and know what a lasso tool is, and it'll tell it what to do, and then AI can fill in a lot of things like creatively. If you want like a pink elephant, it can make you one you rather than you having to be able to draw it. But I'm now wondering, I wonder if it can coach you on public speaking if you give it examples of good and bad. Because obviously AI, it is working on examples of good and bad. And it works, it just pulls information off the internet. There are these issues with AI where it has maybe pulled off racist jokes and then thought that that was genuinely funny. And you're like, no, that wasn't even funny then. And so I'm wondering, I've not tried that. That might give me something to experiment with and I
There
can
you
come back
go.
and tell you.
The idea came from here, and so we're
Yeah,
cutters
right.
in. We're doing a proper thing. No, but it always makes the general point. It's rubbish in, rubbish out. And so when you're
Yeah.
programming these things, this is
Mm.
what you need to do. And people remember famously about Gemini when it first started. It basically rewrote history to make it
Yes.
as PC as possible, but went completely the wrong way way by distorting everything. But going back, the 1956 Dartmouth conference birthed the term artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Why did it take decades for AI to move from theory to something tangible?
Compute power, basically. So the chips themselves, and NVIDIA, that chip has been a game changer. Compute power itself. Do you remember? So my mother's cousin was the first female. I think it's in Scotland, because obviously, bear in mind, I'm Scottish based. When I go the first, it means in Scotland generally. Was the first female computer science person, and she was in a room that is the size of quite a large double bedroom in London.
Right.
And I mean like a double with double wardrobes, to give people an idea of size.
Double, double.
Double, like a big one that a woman could put her clothes in. A proper double bedroom.
Yes.
Space for shoes. Anyway, she was the first one, and that whole room was filled with computers. And that was in the days when it was black screens and writing. So whilst the concepts were there and the ideas were there, you didn't have the chips that could process fast enough. You just didn't have the compute power, and it was phenomenally expensive. I mean, if you even look at video editing software, now I can pull out a laptop and I can be editing from my laptop. Now, in the 90s, again, it was the room size of an extra large double would have what they call a D1 machine. And this is what some people like the BBC would use to edit their news together. And you'd put in these graphics, and you had to be very specific. A graphic designer had to design the graphics, whereas these days I can pop onto Canva and get my graphics, and then I can slide them on as supers. There's so much stuff that can be done these days that anybody, if you can be bothered to take the time or open up Google AI, and it can guide you on what you're doing, that it's insane how the chips, like NVIDIA chips particularly, I mean, have you seen that? I wasn't going to talk about this, but you've got me now. There's this thing about this size. So I've got small hands. It's about something about half the size of my hand, and it's basically a computer brain in a box, and it runs on human brain cells, on neurons, which I think is, as a Christian, toxic, because that's still a living sentient being, and you've grown that, and it dies after 6 months. However, when you look at the energy it uses, it's so much more efficient than anything we can make that's artificial. And even the words artificial intelligence, I think it has been misnamed. And there's a lot of debate around that. And I think even the name of it is toxic because it's scaring people.
Oh, it's definitely scary. But let's go back to those using real brain cells. Where did they get those from?
They're growing them in a lab. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to, I think in most parts of the world, even in China, they would be like, you can't just dig out a person's brain, But what they're doing is in a petri dish, you can grow brain cells. Now, my understanding is I think they tried mice ones, and that then the neurons were learning so quickly that it was way more efficient than anything that we can build with tech. But I do, as I said, I find that concerning, as that's still a sentient living thing. Right, that's absolutely sentient, and it dies after 6 months. The other thing that I do think is that if the neurons are in that machine and you make it something bigger, you would potentially have actually a genuine intelligence, something that's consciousness inside of a robot. Now that is very dystopian to me, and that is where danger comes in, and it may decide that it doesn't like the human race and what it's doing, and it's just going to wipe us out. I mean, these things, like, there is the whole concept that if you put something into human consciousness, it becomes true. If you look at the monkeys on the islands, and with the monkeys, one monkey works out how to crack open a coconut, an island nearby that no monkeys have visited, suddenly, like a couple of weeks later, work out how to do it. And the concept is that this information travels across the quantum field. Well, if you have a robot with actual physical neurons, they too will be able to pick up what's in the quantum field. And you and we're amazing people, obviously, so we put out nice information. Yeah, but there are other people out there who are very unhappy, who maybe do think the world should come to an end and that people are parasites. Well, if that's going out and you're a robot has sentience, and you pick that up, you might take that as an executive order. We don't know where this is going to go, but what we do know is it's not something. The genie's out the bottle, and it's how big do you make the genie?
Yeah, no, absolutely, very valid point. I mean, it was I talk about
Mm,
Alan Turing, and we should rightly sing his praises because during his
mm.
particular time, he was having all sorts of problems. We now even recognise him. I always say this on the back of a £50
Yeah.
note. There's Alan Turing, but he
Wow.
was the person who was differently wired brain. He came up
Yeah.
with all of those sort of things and helped, obviously, with the Enigma code and
Yes.
breaking that side. But
Yeah.
his test, the imitation game, is what he called it. His test was basically to say when you're talking to a computer, you have to basically be fooled to see if you're really talking to a real human being. Well, we're there already, aren't we?
I mean, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I did meet a guy scientist the other day who basically had told his AI, his like ChatGPT, to go on and ask it. So he asked a whole bunch of questions, and it went, "Well, now pretend you're me and keep asking these questions," type thing. And then after and work out if you're real. And then came back a couple of days later, and it was like, and it was kind of like, wow, this is out with what I'm meant to do. I'm not meant to have consciousness type thing. It was basically the answer that came back. I've not tried that myself. I don't think. I mean, there are experiments going on. So this is quite interesting. This brings me on to something I was going to talk about later, but baristas. We no longer need baristas. Edinburgh University has created an arm that can fully AI robotic arm make your coffee for you. Now, that's really upsetting for me because in Scotland, when I was younger, how I got my training in TV and camera work was I had to work as a cleaner. And the reason that they kept me on is free staff, bear in mind, because when you have somebody in a workplace, that desk costs money to run. You're taking up space where a fee earner could be. You understand this being illegal, that, even doing like free, I had to work for a couple of years when I was in law for free, and you have another job to balance it. So I could understand the training, and then I was worth money to them, right? Um, and this is quite normal in some professions. But my thing was I made the most, because I'd worked in a coffee shop, I made the most phenomenal tea and coffee. Like, and I could make cakes. And so basically I would do massive cups, right? Absolute mess of things, and really mess things up and maybe talk out of turn because I was quite, being Fetty's quite boisterous, would give my opinion and then like be quiet person in the background. But I was exceedingly beautiful and I made the most phenomenal tea and coffee. And I used to hear the head of operations go, God, she's absolutely this, that, and the other. I went, oh God, coffee. Oh, and this is before Starbucks existed. And all the clients would talk about it. I made tea. I would brew it for a time and we'd talk to it. And like, and the coffee I understood about mixing in a certain amount of milk and cream. And I made this amazing hot chocolate, like mocha. And it would take time to make. And I'd go off and I'd have it prepared for them coming. And in Scotland, it rained. It's like that
Oh,
sort of rain
yes,
that
absolutely.
you can wring your clothes out, yeah. And so that would happen. And I know they'd been on the lash the night before, and people would come in and be like, oh, "You're very good at it. Where did you get it? Can we get one too?"
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, I got offered jobs on the basis I would just make coffee the rest of my life, and I was like, I want more than that. I need like filming
No,
experience.
absolutely. But
So
it's not just
that's
coffee. I
worrying
mean,
me.
well, he always says, I'm a barrister, qualified as a barrister, and those in the criminal side, when they always say that sometimes to be a barista earns more than a barrister when they're first starting. So they work on that sort of basis. But you're right, it's not just coffee. They're doing cocktails and various other things, and they're
Mm.
automating all sorts of interesting side. I think the principle is this: is that every human endeavor can effectively be replaced by machine. I mean, we started in the 1990s, if you like, as well.
Mm.
IBM's Deep Blue beat the chess champion Gary Kasparov. Was that a moment, a triumph of human ingenuity, or the moment we realized machines might outsmart us?
I think it was a triumph of humanity, actually, because machines are better at chess, but we still go and see the real people. And it's exactly the same in the music industry. It doesn't matter how great that sounds, it's human consciousness. You've got to understand that it is human consciousness. It's a story. People buy into people like you and I. Like, I talk about neurodiversity and AI and how it's a game changer for us. I have, actually, if you look at my brain scan, there are bits of my brain that are so damaged, like behind my right eye, where BCG went over the blood-brain barrier because I got it very late in the day. I was dropped when I was born. There was all these sort of issues. So you look at my brain, but I've managed to get a master's, and it has been with the help of not that AI did my programs for me, but with spell checks, for instance, are AI driven, very basic things that everybody is using. However, running my business, I utilize AI for a lot of that. The things I don't want to do because I'm a creative, they're just boring. But what nobody went. Like I had this amazing cybersecurity call yesterday with a chap who I'm going to have on, and actually I'm trying to get them on for you, from India, and they've got some people based here as well, and that they do GDPR. So basically, you put into their version of a chat GDP that tells you UK GDPR and what you need, and also from a cybersecurity point of view, what you should be hiring, what you need, where your one man band is going, or you're maybe 2 or 3 people that you're running in a business are going, and that just helps alleviate. As women, we do worry a lot. But that's why we give birth and have children, because you need a man. I love you guys, but you're doers, right? We're creators. If you were having a baby, 3 months into it, you would get bored because you can't play golf anymore or whatever. You can't play you can't play contact rugby, right? You'd be shoving it out with like an arm, an ear, and an eye, and it'd be hopping about like. I love you, but no. Women do take care of things, but that also, when it's in business, we maybe overthink things, and that's where these kind of AIs come in, because it alleviates it. Well, if you put that overthinking on top of an ADHD woman who in ADHD does make people really overthink things, and you put that's a layer on a layer. Oh, great! So for £100 a month, or like I can buy £100 worth of tokens, and I can find out actually how liable I am, and then I can go off and hire an actual barrister. If something's happened, I can go hire a specialist in the field who can give me really amazing advice and AI does the first 80% and people do the last 20, because also as human beings we want to be told, and people like to pass the power over to people. That's why doctors and GPs have so many people coming to see them that they don't actually need to be seeing them. That's why A&E is so busy. We want to be told, whereas in the old days, you would go to, my great grandmother was a wise woman, a sage, and people would come to her for healing, and she had this big book of things, and they needed to be told, and then they would maybe go off and see a big doctor in America who would tell them the same thing and go, we don't know why you spent the money on the flights. The other woman was in a really good job, babe. Silly you. But we like to be told. So I do think the chess thing is interesting, but it is also, as you said, that's been going on for some time, and we still want to go see human beings.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, I often reference the research they did at the University of California, San Diego, saying that Chat GPT was more empathetic than chatting to your GP. Or I gave them the line, but it was interesting. But the principle was that, because it had more time, more information, and so on and so forth. So the thing to do, and the real message, and as you know, I speak around the world and advising people about these seismic changes, but the opportunities and the threats. Using it as a co-pilot is really, really effective. But I want to carry on through the history, because I think it's so important for people, and I've never seen it all in one place, and the Andrew Eborn show is going to be where it is. They can get this history, they can understand it, we can unpack it. AI had some winters, didn't it? Periods of stagnation. It was hit hard in the 1970s and 80s, maybe because of computer processing, as you say. What kept the dream alive, and are we at risk of another freeze today?
Okay, so in the 70s, obviously, we had the 3-day week. So energy was at a shortage, and AI wasn't putting food on tables. My family had their own business at that time, and in our village, we were the main employer. We kept foods on the tables. We could deliver when nobody else could deliver. So there was a very back to basics. In the 80s, it all became about finance. And again, whilst AI was important, we were having the big boom of stock markets and stuff like that. And that's in the days when the UK was truly a democracy. And we hadn't passed out powers to other people, and we hadn't passed, a lot of the MPs didn't have powers past the civil service and stuff like that. I mean, you understand about all this, you're a lawyer. I don't think the British public realised that a lot of the MPs are just glorified large councillors these days. They don't have as much power as you think. And that's why we're having trouble pushing things along with immigration, for instance, and making the changes, because the civil service run a lot. And then obviously, even with the withdrawal from the EU, Ireland's still in it. There's still a lot of laws that we're not really withdrawn at all. And we haven't gone back to, we've passed a lot of powers out to quangos. And all of this stagnates things, because whilst we don't have the ability to do executive orders, the government before could get together and just make stuff happen. In the 80s, like I said, anyway, so this is an example of government making things happen. In the 80s, the square mile was revolutionized, and a lot of money was able to be made, and we had that boom. Then in the 90s, we had the dot-com boom. And that really was kind of laying the pathway for AI. The internet was the game changer where people could share information. Again, I think that was a guy from Scotland. We are good at giving you things. And then and so you have these stagnations that come along, but that's natural. And I don't think of it as a stagnation. What I think of it is like, so I remember when I was in the 90s, I was at uni, and there was a guy who was studying artificial intelligence as his degree. And again, it was more sci-fi kept the dream alive, right? But like anything, people think that everything is instant because they can put stuff into Google. But when you come, say, for farming stock, you have to plough the land, plant the seed, let it germinate, love it, fertilize it. And that's what's been going on with AI. There has been a lot going on behind the scenes. But what you're seeing now is decades of researchers researching on it. And there weren't massive research grants for these things, right? And the sort of stuff that was being discovered, say, by in America, was because it'd been paid for by military. They're not putting that in the mainstream. So things like, we have sonic weapons that, you can give out a frequency and it will disable a body or a ship. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that we've had for a long time that people aren't aware of, because it's not actually in the public interest for them to know about it, because they would just freak out.
Well, I think this is the thing, and then people see drones and various other bits and pieces. We're learning more and more, and obviously from a military point of view, even though we've just had that extraordinary leak with the, I think with fat fingers rather than technology failure was my conclusion on that. But I think the basic sort of idea is that people are scared, and we need to basically reassure them, say, look, these are the capabilities, but these are the threats as well. Now, films like looking at sci-fi like 2001, A Space Odyssey's HAL 9000. To real world tools. How much has Hollywood shaped our expectation of AI's potential and its dangers?
I would say that Hollywood does a lot more than it realizes. From a human consciousness point of view, like I said, if you talk, even if you look at the Bible, you talk, first there was the word. You can talk things into existence. Now, you can have, when I worked in law, I used to see collective psychosis. And this is why the police really wanted CCTV, because people who hadn't even spoken to each other would come up with the same story. I would go, so the man in the pub that assaulted you, did he come in the door on the right hand side or the door on the left? And what was he wearing? And the guy was wearing red, and he came in the door on the right and he left by the door on the left. And then other people were like, no, 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 he was wearing yellow and he came in the door on the left and he left by the door on the right. And then you'd actually get the CCTV, and the guy had come out the toilets, was wearing blue, had assaulted the man and left in the dead door on the left. Right. And didn't have brown hair, he had blonde hair. And the collective consciousness, when you interviewed enough people, they would come up with a very similar story a lot of the time. And then maybe be one person who would go, no, that isn't. So you have to interview people, keep them separated, interview them separately. And that wasn't through. And even you get somebody who'd walked past and be like, yeah, I was walking past that day and he was wearing, and I'd be like, and there'd be maybe one person who would stand out and be kind of near the truth. So there is this whole issue. So not only has sci-fi films put into the collective consciousness, if you look at this from we're in the multiverse, which they've now proven, and that this basically is what is inside your head is projecting onto the computer screen of your life, as it were, then most definitely, energetically speaking, quantum field speaking, they have managed to put it into the consciousness of the people. Also, you do program people's brains. The word I am is very programmable. In the 1950s, or say during the war, right, they only had positive news being put on the news. If you look at BFBS, which is the radio station, which is a charity, which is for people in the armed forces, they only play positive, happy music. If you've noticed, there's no, oh my God, she left me. It's all like, I'm happy. Yeah, the music's great. And the way that they present the news, is very factual. They're not like, oh my God, this is terrible. It's like, okay, so we have an opportunity for a water company to exist in the UK because currently there is less water than there should be. Really talking about water shortages, yeah. Right? But they will present it in such a way that gives you hope.
And I've done that. I mean, I've had clients. I've helped launch channels for people about good news because bad news sells. Good news, we need that positive influence. And I've worked with our good friends on Forces TV as well and helped get that out and so on and so forth. So really good. And as you know, Errol Musk, Elon's father, is on my show all of the
Daddy
time. Breaking
Musk.
news. What's that? That was
Daddy
wonderful,
Musk.
wonderful stuff. And the mainstream media, they're picking up the stories. They every single time. There's even today. There's another story from the Daily Mail and Newsweek. They're all picking up on those interviews. We talk about obviously, and the reason he comes on, and the reason I love it so much is there's so much rubbish spoken about in the media that I like to go
Yes.
directly to the source where possible, or at least as
Yes.
close to the source to get at least their take on it. And we always say that if you don't read the newspapers, you're ill-informed, but if you read the newspapers, you're misinformed. And so we have
Right.
to question everything. But a number of stories that are coming out at the moment, Elon, with his political
Mm.
allegiances, basically he's, as you know, Tesla's, they face these appalling arson attacks. Could
Yeah.
AI-driven autonomous vehicles become targets in a world skeptical of tech overlords?
Look, you don't need AI to make vehicles targets. I remember the days of the IRA, and don't you remember MPs used to have to get that little like long, looked like a thing, long thing, it looked like a really big thing that you would like check your teeth with to see if you've got decays, the mirror at the end, and they'd have to have one to look under their car and see if they've car bombs. So you don't need AI. Yeah, it could make you more of a target, but if you look at nuclear power stations, drones could target them, everything, and that's with or without AI. Right, you usually just get a drone and drop stuff, and kaboom, you're off. God forbid that ever happens. But they're if people want to get you, they're going to get you. They don't need AI to do it. I do think autonomous vehicles, it would be easier to hack it than, say, a vehicle with a human being in it. But if you look at Tiananmen Square and what happened there, in China, they took a person out of every single regiment, they put them in a room, and they started brainwashing them and sleep depriving them, and then they became killing machines. Well, if you really wanted to do that, this is exactly what terrorist groups do. They take people out of their normal environment, they brainwash them and make them into killing machines. And these people could very much easily end up driving your car, even if it's not got AI in it. And you might find that you have hired somebody. I mean, back in the day of like the Oracle of Delphi, this goes back into history, this happened. What Persians had managed to infiltrate at the highest level a king's personal guard. And the king had sent people off to find out which the oracles worked, and Delphi was the one that did, because he knew when he chopped up turtle legs and all that and put it in a big pot in this courtyard, she had seen that vision. And then he turned around and started talking, something happened, and he thought his personal guard, I think 3 out of the 4 of them turned out to be Persian placements. Had been with them for over 20 years, around that time. And so this has been going on forever. People can be placed. So it's AI or it's people. If they want to get you, they're going to get you, babe.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, it's the days, if you like. This is when they're trying to go against tech. I think this one's charged at the moment with political side, but obviously people used to burn printing presses and things like that to stop the revolution. The other thing we've got another news story. Apple's AirPods, obviously, AirPods Max just got a lossless audio update via AI optimization. How is AI quietly sneaking into our everyday gadgets?
Okay, so that's quite worrying. There's been rumors that they were going to do that for ages and read your brainwaves. Now, Neurable is a headset that can give you an EEG while you're doing it, which is great if you want to know if you're getting Alzheimer's or how your body reacts to certain foods and stuff like that. But that's their sales point. That's what they're selling it as. People know what they're buying. Now, with Apple AirPods, number one, there has been in America, there's been a lot of people that have had to get tumors removed because of the amount of radiation that's coming off them. Now, for that AI to work in such a small device, I imagine there'll be even more radiation. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a neurologist,
Yeah,
but my
and obviously
common sense,
they're not here to respond to that
no,
story,
they're
and
not.
I'm sure we
However,
need to be very careful what we say.
yeah, but however, there are documented medical cases of this. There are doctors that actually specialize in. Now, everybody's brain behaves differently, but at the end of the day, is this a consent-based thing or a non-consent-based thing? And what I'm all about is consent.
Yeah.
So I don't have that. I'm a musician, so I protect my brain and my ears. So I have wired ones because I understand how Wi-Fi works, the Bluetooth works, right? And I don't want that on my. Also, I've been getting brain scans and been doing stuff with my brain since I was a kid. So, I'm very aware of what goes on inside my head and how fragile that is. And I don't have Bluetooth devices. And they used to give me chronic headaches, and anything that gives you a headache, just stop using it. Right. So I have wired ones. But what my point is that did they ask people first if they could do this? Are they then utilizing the data from the brain that's being analysed. What's really going on here, and where is the consent?
Yeah. And it's all about consent, isn't it? And one of the great campaigns which we've been behind, and we've had brilliant people on from the music industry and various other creative industries, is this whole data use and access bill.
Yeah,
And originally, it was going to be that they automatically had the right to use your copyright
yeah,
works. And I remember good old Frank saying, "Well, he didn't mind until you suddenly suggested, well, give the money to the state," and then I think that
but
sort of flummoxed him for a little bit. But the reality is that they've now, fortunately, we've got a victory there, although it's still being discussed. But the basic sort of principle is that they now have to opt in. And you either
yeah,
have to give your consent, which is absolutely essential. And I think that's really, really important. And what I love to do on this show is make sure that people understand what the technology does, but also
mm,
the risk. And so many people are signing forms, giving away their data. Data is the new currency. And if you
yes.
and we always say and emphasize to people, if you're not paying for a product, you are that product.
Yeah, right. Well, this is it. There are very few websites that actually let you know that. I think TechCrunch is one of the few ones that does this, that if you opt in, if you say, yeah, you consent that, you accept their terms, that 265 other companies who they do business with is going to get your data. Not many people explain that obviously to you.
Yeah.
And that, you can manage your preferences or reject it. Now, rather annoyingly, there are certain newspapers that if you reject the opportunity to give them your data, they then want you to pay to read their paper, their online version, and you have to sign in, to do that and pay them. And so I just don't read them.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, as I say,
this
data is the
this
new currency. And what I
yeah,
love doing on this show is unpacking things in a way we don't talk jargon. We sort of jargon bust as appropriate, and we'll continue to do so. So if people have questions, and they have been writing all sorts of questions, anything you'd like explained, do get in touch with me at Andrew Eborn at Octopus TV. Subscribe that button now. How can people get hold of you, Thea?
Thea at aispymedia.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at aispymedia, A space by space media, and that's on LinkedIn. So
Fantastic.
yes,
We're going to continue having the good, the great from the AI industry in this regular feature, Back to the Futurist. Thea, as always, thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time.
pleasure. Bye, Andrew.